thank you for this nice introduction. I'm always embarrassed when I get called distinguished and you know, all my career, and there's lots of expectation. Frank does an incredible PR job, and I met at least 10 people who told me, I understand you're an extraordinary speaker. That's been to come and speak. Now, I would like to say a few things. First, first time Frank heard me speak, it was a 3-hour class, and today I have 1 hour and then discussion. So I hope I picked the right 1 hour, because maybe the good part was the other 2 hours. So if you don't like what you hear, then that's the reason. And also another thing, also I'm realizing this is, I'm going to make it a bit different than what I initially planned. I mean, where I was planning to go through my slides and talk to you some philosophical history of you know, retail development. But at the same time, now that I better understand the mission of the center, you know, transcultural, you know, so I would like to mention to you my personal story, which might be relevant a little bit for that, maybe the first 10 minutes. I don't like to speak about myself, but I think it might be relevant here. Plus, many of you ask me, you know, where are you coming from and so forth. And normally, when I speak to an audience in Ohio in particular, people always ask me, they want to ask me where I am from, you know, because I speak maybe a bit different. And that happens in the airplanes very often. I used to say West Texas. And people, then they would do that quizzical look. Now, they don't want to insult me, telling me, you don't sound like from West Texas. But now that I'm in Ohio, I say I'm from Chillicothe, Ohio. And if you know your history of Ohio, Chillicothe was the first capital city of the state. And same, kind of a god for the second place. I mean, nobody knows about it. And there's the same quizzical look. Well, the story is I was born in Turkey. And because this is related to Asian Studies Center, so obviously Frank wanted me to say that I was born on the Asian side of Istanbul. Unfortunately, it's not true. Now, I used to live on the European side of Istanbul, but I can say I went to high school for 4 years on the Asian side of Istanbul. So every year I took the ferry and I went from one continent to another for school. So that qualifies me a little bit as Asian. But more importantly, my mother side, Armenian origin, are all from a small city in Turkey called Muş. So I know there is Esra here from Turkey, so Muş is kind of north of, you know, where she's from. So I clearly qualify for half of me, at least, from the Asian side of Turkey. So that's the beginning. So I was born in Istanbul, and I always say that the reason I am who I am and I accomplish what I have accomplished mostly is due to Istanbul. It's an incredible city for those of you who know the place, and if you're not, you should go there. Because it's a clearly multicultural, multi-ethnic, with deep roots in history. It's a place who really helped me become who I have become. I lived there until I was 17, went to college in France. I went to college in Toulouse, south of France. And so after my high school, essentially I never lived or worked in Turkey except for short visits. My family used to be there until they all passed. In France I went to college, I got multiple degrees and started working for a French company and married a French wife, and my first one. And in France we have conscription, that's the airborne division. Everybody has to go to military. Something which is not a bad thing actually, I think, but anyway, so yes, I jumped from airplanes, and I started working for a French company, and that French company is the one who asked me to come to look to the United States for starting an affiliate in the United States. So I remember first time I was 26 years old, get sent here to the market study in the United States. So my first, I arrived from Montreal, because you know, they still speak French a little bit just to make the transition. And then from there, then I went to New York. And I remember my first experience, I decided to stay at the Hilton. Because in Istanbul, the best hotel was the Hilton. So when they asked me in New York where you stay, I said, at the Hilton. So I went to the Midtown Hilton, you know, in the big building around 54th, I think it is. And I go down there and try to check in. And, you know, and then the gentleman asked me, and I was 26, first time in the US, he asked me, how do you intend to establish credit? I didn't understand what he was asking. Then he asked me, well, how do you intend to pay? I said, cash. And he said, well, anyway, I realized very quickly, they asked me to put $1,000 deposit, you know, cash. Well, I had $5,000 on me, so it was okay to give $1,000. I had a credit card. So very quickly I learned that I could not survive here and do any market studies unless I get my American Express card to continue. So that was the very first time. I barely spoke English at the time. Then anyway, long story short, I studied all the United States, literally. I mean, I went everywhere. California, New York, Houston, Texas, and so forth. And finally we decided to start a company in Houston. And so I came with my family at 28, moved to Houston. I had 2 little kids, and I mean, some of you, and I'm one person here who knows me from those years, but he's over there. And we were both very young, and we started the company here. And anyway, long story short, divorced, remarried. The divorce was because of the economic crisis. 85, 86 was too tough. We had to go back, and I decided to stay here. I really love this country. I love Texas, and married a Texan from Corpus Christi. And I really love Texas, and I mean, David remembers, I mean, I have my, let me say, my jeans, but I also have my cowboy boots, my belt matches my boots, I have my hats, I have my summer hats, my winter hats. I even have the plastic boxes, we can pile them on top of each other so we can take them for trips. So, you know, and I do take them sometimes, and I can dance, you know, quick step, Cotton Eye Joe, and like my wife says, I'm a little bit Texan until I speak, so that's what I'm for the Texan, but don't start speaking. So, came here, started the company, and in '87 things got tough, moved to New York, and moved to Miami and so forth, but about 20 years ago, April 1, 2 days ago, April 1st, started my personal own company, and started it with $1,000, me and my wife. And I mean, this is America, that's why you love this country. And we started that company in order to become a developer, and at the beginning we couldn't be a developer. You know, because now you don't just come and say I'm a developer, especially if you don't have a rich father or a rich wife or a rich someone. And 1993 was not the best time, you know, to start a company anyway in real estate. So started the company, and at the beginning we did everything: consulting here, you know, consulting there, managing small office building here and there, and so forth, just to survive until. You know, we end up, you know, involved with some French banks. And my first project that many people know me for is a project in Miami called Coco Walk. Coco Walk is in Coconut Grove. It was a small 2-acre piece of land. And the French banks get stuck with it. I mean, they funded a loan, and then at the end the developer, you know, couldn't develop it. So the French took it back in lieu of foreclosure. And they had like $10 million in 2 acres of land in Miami, Florida. I mean, then, today is still a lot of money, but then it was lots of money. And to make things worse, they had loaned the money when the dollar was 5 francs, and by the time they defaulted, the dollar was 10 francs. And as you know, you adjust your balance sheet, so now the problem was a $100 million problem for a $100 million franc problem. So what do you do? So we were brought in to develop the project. So I never done development before. I mean, all development I've done in David was industrial warehouses. That was my expertise in development. So we said, okay, we are going to do this project. French banks asked for advice, and we went ahead and built this project where we introduced cinemas, restaurants, bars, comedy clubs with Victoria's Secrets and Gaps and Banana Republics. I mean, a mix. Many of you are too young to know this, but 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you never put a cinema or a restaurant in the same project as those retail tenants because they would invade parking spaces. They were excluded, you know, I mean, from most of the malls. That's why the word outlot comes. You would put the restaurants in the outlots, the cinema on the far end of the parking lot. So you put all this open air in Miami, and at the time, I mean, lots of comments were, I mean, what are those guys doing? And, I mean, that's not done and it's going to fail. I remember I did my first real estate retail leasing deal with Limited. And yeah, I know the leasing guys, retail leasing guys here, and Jamie Bersani, who is the head of Limited Brands Real Estate today, was the guy I was dealing with. And I was trying to list in this project. I wanted to put, you know, a Limited store in, and he turned me down. And so I went to Columbus, first time ever, you know, winter, you know, it's 0 degrees, literally 0, not Celsius, Fahrenheit. And so you go there and meet with the guy, and he tells me, look, he said, you know, how big is your project? Well, it's 140,000 square feet. That was way too small for a mall. He said, how many department stores? I said, well, none. He said, who's your anchor? I said, it's a cinema. how many stories? 1, 2? I said, no, 4 stories. He says, air conditioned, that's Miami. No, open air. You know. And he said, how many of those have you done before? He said, Yaromir, we are checking, you know, the wrong side of this thing. I mean, how we are going to do this? And, you know, in French there's an expression, they throw you out of the door, you come back from the window. So we say, you know, I said, what can you do? He said, well, look, he said, if you give me $100 a square foot to build my store, and I can pay you 10% rent, gross, total, and if in 2 years I don't do 250, I kick out, that is, I can leave the lease, then I'll make the deal. I didn't know any better, said fine, I mean, I need the tenant to start the project, so that was fine, so we said yes. And then because of him, then I was able to get gap, and the project happened. And then he did $750 a square foot in 1990. So, you know, $700 a square foot is a good number today. But then it would be, I mean, that was an extraordinary number. It was triple the fleet average. I mean, it was a very, very high number. So he was paying $75 rent, which was not at all in the plans initially. And, you know, and then this project, that little project, became an incredible project because it allowed, the cinema became #1 theater in the marketplace, the restaurants were doing the highest numbers, retailers were doing very well. And for the first time we realized that the leisure time users could be mixed with the rest. And then from there, I mean, every project I did, you know, followed that pattern and was inspired from it. And then, you know, the owner of Victoria's Secret Limited branch, Mr. Wexner, was looking for someone to develop a major project in Columbus. Because Mr. Wexner is a retailer and he was getting tired of the developers doing all the same thing always, you know, department stores, 30-foot wide hallway, you know, connecting them and so forth. He wanted to show them it can be done different. He was looking for someone. So I found myself in front of him and I was competing with Sheldon Gordon. Sheldon Gordon is in Vegas the 4 shops. I mean, he's known for that, but there are not many other projects. And this little firm from Miami at the time, you know, basically got the deal, and we were given the opportunity to develop that site, that project, and that became the Easton Town Center. And that project, I mean, is a very successful project today. And a few years later, I moved my company to Columbus, and we lived there. And after Easton, I developed 4 other projects of the same scale. These are $1.5 million square foot projects, and all mixed use and so forth. So that's basically the history of the guy whose mother was from Asia. It's another connection. And there is some trans-cultural relationships, right? Turkey, France, America, Texas. Texas, the country, and I loved always Texas. I don't know if you know this, but you know, Texas, you know, when it became an independent republic, do you know that France was the first country who recognized the independent republic of Texas? And they still today, the embassy exists in Austin called the French Legation. It's a museum that you can go and visit. And I find those bits of story about Texas remarkable, you know. And anyway, so that was kind of the history part. And please feel free to ask questions later, you know, in I mean, even in on the personal part of things, just to give you a sense. What I want to talk to you about is to give you some perspective about what's happening in retail, at least allow you to understand what's happening in retail, maybe through a different way of organizing the information. So this is about, obviously, brick and mortar retail. I'm not talking about internet, except as it affects the rest. So there is a fundamental transformation occurring in the world of regional retail development. I mean, you can see on the top left, you know, the traditional mall, the loop road, you know, you can notice the anchor department stores and so forth. And then on the right side, that's a picture of my project, but there are many similar to this, which is clearly doesn't look at all the same. Many regional malls are dying. You know, Houston, I've not kept up with it, but in Dallas, I mean, there are multiple ones I know. I mean, clearly they're past their prime, and you know, they're basically, I mean, they're becoming like this. And if you want to get a sense of the malls dying, simply go to deadmalls.org, and there's a whole collection of them. It's a blog, you know, which basically reminisces the past of malls and so forth, and plenty of photographs of that type. But then at the same time, there's a new type of. But then there are some malls who are very successful. I mean, you look in Dallas or Houston, I mean, whether it's the Galleria or, I mean, the malls are doing well. I mean, here are the pictures I put Mall of Millennia in Orlando. I mean, a very successful mall, doing over $1,200 a square foot. South Coast Plaza in California, doing extremely well. And Somerset, that's in Detroit, you know, I mean, here's a collapsing economy, still a very, very powerful mall. And so they are successful. And then while those malls are successful, some are dying, there are some successful town centers are emerging. And I give you some pictures here, and the top left one, again, is one of my projects in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. The middle top one is a Simon project in Bowie, Maryland. So a Simon, known for pedestrian products, I mean, that's one of their projects. On the top right is a project in Palm Beach, City Place, that Related developed. And then the bottom left two are my projects. One is in Columbus, one is in, I think, Dayton. And the bottom right one is The Grove, developed by Rick Caruso in California, in Los Angeles. So there's this new product that's emerging, while, you know, some malls are doing well. So this this town center, these open-air projects, I mean, a good close one here would be maybe South Lake in Dallas, if you know that mall in Dallas. Is that a passing fad, you know, which is just, you know, happens only in certain areas, you know, like, you know, fast-growing economies where population gets added and so forth. You know, basically markets are under retail, so those people come in and put those new products because anything goes in those markets. Or is there a model change? Is really there's something different happening, and those are a fundamental change? Well, if you look at the town centers, first we are realizing that the change does not only occur in fast-growing markets. I mean, here I picked two of my projects. One is I did projects in Ohio, a couple of them, in Wisconsin. I mean, that doesn't sound like Texas, and still we have developed those open-air projects there. You look at, is it big in those markets with no competition? Not totally true. I give you two examples here. The left photograph, all the way to the left is the Taubman Mall, built 20 years ago in Columbus. Downtown, great anchors, Marshall Field, Jacobson, all the good names. And the photograph, the green space, is that mall demolished. That is, it did not even make 20 years. Today it's a big park in downtown Columbus. In the meantime, I developed the project to the right, which is Eastern Town Center, in the same market. So, I mean, here's a traditional mall by Taubman, who was doing very, very well, dies, and then here is another project comes in a market where there is competition. Then you say they may go in under retail markets. I mean, I'm picking those on purpose again. I mean, here is a picture of Dayton. The two yellow dots are 2.5 million square foot malls, and they are 12 miles apart. And Dayton is 1 million people, so it's not huge. And here we came and put an open-air project, the picture to the left and the red dot in between. And we are almost about to kill one of the malls, the one to the north. So we believe that there is really a paradigm shift, and that what's happening is a response to some fundamental trends who are really reshaping the industry, because there are fundamental socioeconomic trends happening. So the 5 trends. First, there is a need for sustainable development. There is a renewed interest in urban life patterns, and I mean, in Houston, you know that very, very well. There is a change in the department stores, and that's a euphemism. I mean, there's really a big problem in the department stores. Then there is the consumer preference about aspirational experiences, and I will explain that more about what that means. And then the impact of e-commerce on retailing. These are all things that are happening who have nothing to do with my thinking, innovators thinking. These are real things, these are societal things. And by the way, I mean, you don't need to take notes, because I can make this available to you, the whole presentation. So unless, I mean, there's some wisdom in what I say, then I write those down. But, so let's look at the 5 trends. Sustainable development practices. I mean, it's obvious that dense environments have a lower carbon footprint. I mean, you know, cities have a lower carbon footprint than sprawls. Dense environments reduce sprawl, you know, less use of green space. Dense environments use more effective use of infrastructure. I mean, a good example would be, say, a parking lot who serves an office building and a cinema. The same parking space gets used twice. And you can say the same thing about offices and hotels and things like that. So, I mean, you don't have to build a parking garage for the office building, then another one for the, I mean, you understand that. And then mixed-use environments reduce traffic congestion and car trips. So, and then the buildings they have reuse potential. When you have a regional mall, that building is such an odd piece of architecture or building. It's very, very difficult to reuse those buildings. That is, when they die, they die. But if you go to an urban pattern, a town center pattern, of a block design, then you can really modify them a block at a time, a building at a time, so the adaptive reuse. I mean, I'm stating the obvious. I mean, this is the cities, right? I mean, that's the way our cities grew and changed. So the mixed-use town centers are a more sustainable model than traditional single-use retail environments. The second thing is a renewed interest in urban patterns. I mean, I'm giving you kind of a quick, presentation here. Why, I mean, the downtowns, why did, downtowns die? That's the history of the destruction, 25 to 50. I like to say this, Euclidean zoning. I know there are mathematicians here, but it's not him. Euclid is a suburb of Cleveland. So Euclidean zoning, yes, the city of Euclid was the first city in America who passed zoning as a tool for urban planning, 1923. Passed, and Ambler Realty, one of my early colleagues, said this is taking under the US Constitution. You cannot zone a piece of property and tell us we cannot use it for what we want. So it went state, federal, and court, and Supreme Court in 1925 said, no, this is the city's right for the general good of the welfare of citizens to be able to restrict by zoning. So zoning became institutionalized in law. But what was interesting is that, it was 1925, you remember, and then what happened? The stock market crashed, then the depression, then the war. So from 1925 to 1945, not much happened in America. Nobody was building anything anyway. So that was in the books, people forget about it. And 1945 arrived, the Second World War ends, everybody comes back, what happens? We want homes, we want hospitals, we want offices, we want everything. What? We are not going to go and hire Olmsted or Pierre L'Enfant, it takes too long. Hire engineers, let's design big squares in the cities and say that square is residential, that square is office, that square is office park, and that square is thing. So zoning became the primary planning tool in America. The second thing happened, FHA, post-war role. You know that FHA came all those laws, right? Veterans came back, so they want to loan their money so they can build their houses. You could put 1% down, you're a veteran, a soldier, so you are good and you can do that. So you could borrow $50,000, $60,000, almost 95, 98% loans, and buy a beautiful little house in the suburbs. But if you are living in town, downtown, around downtown, in one of the neighborhoods, and you wanted to add a bathroom to your house, and you need to borrow $6,000. There was no one to loan you the $6,000. So the whole system was designed, so basically to encourage new construction. Probably there were lobbyists then too, and the home building industry totally encouraged people. It was much easier to build a brand new home than to try in an existing neighborhood to add a bathroom to a house or to remodel a house. The third thing is Eisenhower Interstate Highway System, 56. Obviously Eisenhower, he was the general, so he admired, Hitler's highways because the Germans could move their tanks from one end to the other country very easily. Where it took him, he remembered that when he was in West Point, over a month, 45 days to go basically from Washington DC to the West Coast, with a convoy of vehicles. So he felt that we needed to fix this. Cold War was coming, Russia could disembark at any time, at any part of the United States, we would be able to move quickly. So came the highway system, whose purpose was strategic and military. It's like a little bit like the internet. And but what happened is, it was supposed to come to cities with a loop around them. Well, we started bringing them all the way to downtown. You can see downtown Houston, and you have St. Paul in downtown Columbus, and every downtown And it made it so easy to get in and out of downtown and be able to live in those suburban homes, which were so cheaply financed, and they were being built very quickly. So, I'm sorry. Well, why is the zoning is a problem for downtowns? Because if you think about the zoning, think of all the beautiful places in America. urban places. Think of them. Even Houston is okay, anywhere in the country. Now, I mean, you will see that every place you think, whether it's in Boston or Denver or Chicago, etc., is created before the Second World War. Very few places will come, and if you raise hands, maybe 5% will pick something done after that. Why? Because zoning. Because when you separate the uses, I mean, if he's an office developer, he knows office architects, office financial people, office land, office contractors, office brokers, and he does office. I understand residential, I know to buy residential land, I know residential lenders, I know how the HUD works, I know how I can lease those apartments, and that's all I know. If I'm a retail developer, I'm a member of the ICSC, and that's all I do. And I know who the lenders are, who the brokers are, who the tenants are. Well, who creates downtown? Because you cannot. I mean, they come close to each other, but they never come on top of each other, they don't get mixed, it doesn't work. I mean, this is changing now, but I mean, I'm trying to tell you how we essentially killed our downtown. So essentially between 1945 and now, we added 100 million Americans, but we have not added one, urban downtown that makes sense. We even destroyed the ones we had. So what happens is there has been a major, destruction of this mixed-use environments where people interacted with each other. But there's a return now. These photographs are from Columbus, and they're actually the same buildings now and then. And a few of you told me recently they were in Short North, in Columbus, and so forth. I mean, it's being rejuvenating. It's like downtown Houston. I mean, things are really changing. It's alive, and it's coming back together. There's interest in those things. So what happens is this mixed-use environments, the placemaking becomes a social fabric building tools, and that picture, if you recognize it, is again the project I mentioned, South Lake in Dallas. I mean, it's not really Dallas, but north of the airport. And the building, the red building in the back, is the county courthouse. I mean, the project was created around the county courthouse in a big park and retail and offices and so forth. And so mixed-use projects are trying to be responsive. So mixed-use town centers are responsive to the aesthetic, civic, and urban expectation of today's consumer. I mean, Woodlands, I'm sorry, I was thinking Dallas, but you can talk about Woodlands Town Center, and that's another illustration of those mixed-use, environments where you can create those places. Then the third trend is the diminishing importance of departments, anchors, and the rise of specialty tenants. Again, many of you don't remember this, and attorneys still deal with the remnants of this, but the way a mall got created 25, 30 years ago, basically you got the department store to come with you. Once you get the department stores, then you put all the attorneys in one room, you establish who was getting which corner, you connected them with a 30-foot corridor, and that was your mall. The department store dictated everything. Through their regulations, they determined, how many parking spaces, you cannot move the parking spaces, you cannot move the trees, you cannot move the benches. I mean, everything was very, very strictly designed. And in some malls, the remnants of this still exist today, which makes it very difficult to remodel them or to deal with them. So, but the department stores changed. At the beginning, again, all of you old enough will remember, you could not get into a mall unless you went to the department store. That was the deal. You enter the department store, get into the mall, go into the stores. And it was very strict, that control, how you did this. Why? Because the department stores say, we bring the business, and then the crumbs fall from the little guys in the middle. Things change. The little guys in the middle today are Victoria's Secret. The little guys in the middle are today J. Crew. They are Talbots. They are Williams Sonoma. They are Pottery Barn. They are Restoration Hardware. And these are the guys who in their own right are destinations today. Why? Because they are in your homes through catalogs, they are through internet and through other ways, and people want to get to them, and they don't want to put up really that you have to go through the department store to get to them. So the power of the department store diminished, and plus they started using sales to discount the Walmarts and the Targets of this world, and then those tenants, as I mentioned, the small store became more and more powerful. They became a destination on their own rights. And then another thing happened, and that's why the Cocoa history was important. That Cocoa project, alongside Irvine Spectrum in Los Angeles and Horton Plaza in San Diego, in the late 80s, early 90s, were the first projects where restaurants and cinemas were put in the same environment as retailers. I mean, again, for many young people, many of you, this is like, what's the big deal? it was a big deal. You could not put a restaurant in a cinema in those projects. So when those projects came, and we realized that the same woman who shopped in the, say, Talbot's or Taylor was also the one going to lunch in the Italian restaurant. Or, I mean, we said, well, why have we been separating them? Because of the power of the department stores. As they lost their power and those become destinations, then suddenly, you know, what happened is the open-air environments successfully integrate those uses. Let me make a quick parenthesis here. Why is leisure time and open-air go together? The open-air, by the way, shopping inside is not a bad thing. I mean, in a mall or in a passage, or in, I mean, they exist in Paris, they exist in London. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, also in China, many of them. But if you are going to get into the leisure time business, and you are going to start having restaurants, bars, clubs, cinemas, think about it. Where do you go out to? I mean, you say to go out, right? So, I mean, in Dallas you go out, in Detroit you go to Greektown, in Manhattan you go to the Village, in Denver you go to Larimer Square, I mean, you name them. These are districts, these are areas. Very, very seldom, there are some exceptions, and maybe you can make a test to see if you know them, but there are very few exceptions, but in general, leisure time areas are open-air districts. So if, as a developer, you are going to say, I'm going to provide a leisure time experience, that's I'm going to have a collection of restaurants of different price points, cinemas, clubs, and so forth, then you have to create some kind of an urban fabric, which is the traditional urban fabric to do that with. You cannot build them all inside one huge building and hope that to have a lasting, you know, ability to exist. So the open-air environments allow for the successful integration of those leisure time uses. So basically, all those uses, the specialty tenants, the leisure time users, become anchors of their own right as the department stores, because on a street grid, every one of them is accessible, you know, without having to go inside a building to go to them. You can just go to them directly. I'll give you some numbers here, which are not on the slides. A typical department store, I'll take Easton as my example. I have 2 department stores as anchors. The 2 department stores in Ohio, they do maybe $120 million in volume, 60 million apiece. And they represent 400,000 square feet. So we have 60 million, 400,000 square feet. I'm 120 million and 400,000 square feet. But in the same project, we have 110,000 square feet of restaurants who do $90 million. So 110,000 square feet of restaurant doing 90 million, or 400,000 square feet doing 120 million. Which angle do you prefer? The restaurants pay rent, department store don't. So, you know, and then restaurants are like an orchestra. You can put your high-end restaurant next to Tiffany's. You can put your sports bar next to, you know, Foot Locker. I mean, you can organize your retail in such a way that your restaurant, you know, support and enhance the retailer that you are together with. So the leisure time uses provide for an anchoring of retail projects, totally independent. I mean, it can be fine-grained inside the project rather than being 2 department stores at the ends. So that's the other trend. Okay, now that's the 4th trend. Is that's an important one. I have actually a whole hour-long presentation just on that 4th trend. There are 2 kinds of shopping experiences, and that's important. Basically, there's want-based shopping. You go to shop because you want something, and then you go to shop because you need something. That's an important distinction. Need-based shopping is the things we need to live, right, every day. I mean, a grocery store is a need-based shopping destination. A grocery anchor project, a Home Depot, these are all need-based shopping projects. So in a household, the first dollars of the household go to need-based shopping. There's no household who doesn't do need-based shopping. And if a household is a $50,000 household, they spend maybe all their money on need-based shopping. There's very little money left for want-based shopping or discretionary shopping. A $100,000 household, keeping the same rules, same size, maybe have $50,000 worth of need-based shopping, but then they have $50,000 worth of discretionary expenditures. It's very important to understand that difference. So what happens is that creates 2 kinds of shopping centers. The need-based shopping centers, where you go to satisfy your needs, and in your mind imagine this is everything Weingarten Realty buys, is the Kroger anchor shopping centers, Kimco's portfolio, and so forth, and Regency, is someone in the room. I mean, these are basically, need-based shopping environments, and they are fine-grained. They're everywhere in the city. In Houston, I ask you, how many need-based shopping? I mean, hundreds, because they have to be close to people. Every household, even the poorest household, has to do need-based shopping. But then you go to want-based shopping, aspirational shopping. Let's take the Galleria on one end. So that's an aspirational shopping environment, or need-based, want-based shopping. Now, want-based shopping skims basically the top dollars in the household with more money. I mean, that is, you need a household with higher incomes, and to put enough of them together, so then you have only a few of them in town. You cannot have hundreds of them in town, you can have maybe 10 of them in town. Because you need to aggregate this discretionary spending capacity of a bunch of households to be able to justify those. So essentially, and once you understand that, it really clarifies about the way you do business. You are either in the need-based shopping environment business or a want-based shopping environment business. But look at the financial consequences. A need-based shopping environment, a Kroger or a Home Depot, it's a model which is based on costs. That is, if you make a deal with Home Depot, or you make a deal with Dick's, or you make a deal with, with Kroger, they know to the penny how much the store is going to cost. You tell them how much you are buying the land, and they will tell you, here's the rent I will pay you. So I allow you enough of a margin, so you sell it, and that's your price. And then not only they fix your price, but then they tell you, we'll give you bumps every 10 years, and they will have options to eternity, basically. So how does this, if you're an owner of these projects, how does it look like? It looks like owning bonds, right? I mean, you own bonds. Basically, you clip coupons, there's a bit of upside time to time, and you don't find many families, individual families, who own a need-based shopping center and keep it for posterity. Too risky, because commodity. People can move from here to there overnight for a few dollars rent. It's very difficult. So what happens is, how does Regency do? How does Kimco do? They assemble hundreds of them. They have a big, wide portfolio. So it doesn't matter if one of them or one tenant hurts, because essentially it's like having a bond ladder, if you want, and you have basically enough of them, so that's your safety. Like on the other side, look at the discretionary spending model, like the Galleria. What are the rents based there? I can assure you the rents are not based on costs. The rents in the Galleria, or any project, aspirational project, is based on sales. Essentially, it's the percentage of sales you collect as rent. So if you can have a project who starts at $400 a square foot, and 10 years later it does $800 a square foot, then the rent goes 1.6 times what it was at the beginning. So the rents are directly related to the volume of your retailers. How does that look like as an investment? It looks like buying stock, because it can go up, it can go down. And then you can find families who would stick to their asset. I mean, I don't know if it's still the case, but Memorial Mall used to be owned by a local family at the time, or, I mean, it was not part of the system. They would massage it, fix it, because they can keep it, because if they are competitive and they keep it aspirational, then that project can go forever. And then the rents are based on the sales they are going to do. So it's very important for developers, and for anyone actually, to be clear about what they are trying to do. I mean, either you are in one business or the other. Then the questions become, and we can discuss them later, can you put them together in one place? And then what do you end up with a hybrid model? How does that work? So the trend I wanted to say is that, so what does this to do with the malls? Well, it has to do this. Our mothers, when they went to the mall, that was a big deal. Remember, they were from that post-war generation. Material goods were very important. Buying was aspirational. Buying only was aspirational. Our mother would make up, take their car, park, easy to park, no downtown, no hassle, go in there, spend their afternoon shopping. Every mall was an aspirational shopping environment. You look today, many malls cease to be aspirational. And they cease to be aspirational. Some are not. The ones who are not are the ones who lack capital expenditures. That means that the owner did not keep them up to speed, and basically they become pretty much a need-based environment. That happens to be the closest place to my home, but I don't go there for fun anymore. Where good malls, good shopping center, like places like Woodlands and so forth, you would go to them for fun. I mean, just walking around or eating something and doing something else, they're not as need-based. So this is basically, what happens is the increasing failure of existing regional retail environments, they don't satisfy the want-based trips. So, I mean, this is basically the explanation of what I told you. Whole Food would be a want-based food environment. Giant Eagle would be need-based. I mean, the point here is even an iPhone can be purchased with a 10% discount at Best Buy, could be a need-based experience, or it can be a want-based discretionary experience at an Apple store just for the experience. So even the good don't make that difference. I mean, a burger, can be purchased in 2 places, and you can see pretty obvious what the difference is. And then it's not even a price point. A white blouse can be purchased for $15 at Dress Bar. It can also be purchased at H&M. H&M experience is a discretionary, it's a aspirational experience. Dress Bar experience is a need-based experience. So what happens is when a shopping, a need-based environments tend to be more functional, more proximity, their price sensitivity is important. The want-based environments are more aspirational, regional access, they are less price sensitive. And the rent-based, as I told you, is cost in need-based shopping centers. I mean, there are exceptions to everything I say. I mean, you have to look at it in broad categories. And then in shopping centers, the rent is based on sales. And as I said, similar goods can be sold in both. And most regional retail environments have lost their aspirational nature due to poor tenant mix and inadequate configurations. But frankly, I don't like to put it in writing, but also because of the REIT ownership format. A REIT that is a need-based portfolio, like Regency, like Weingarten, like Kimco, can be owned by a financial institution. Because essentially it's a financial product. You spread your risk, you manage it. An aspirational environment cannot be effectively owned by public entities. The conflict between the fund from operations, how much of it goes into capital and how much of it gets distributed, is a very difficult decision to make. There are very few REITs in the aspirational environments like Taubman who have been able to pull that off. That is, they maintain their level of investment and exclusivity. Many others are basically slowly milking the asset, which will ultimately die except in exceptional locations. So the mixed-use town center, I mean, Woodlands, South Lake are responsive to those aspirational. The impact of e-commerce, and with this I'm going to, finish the 5th one. Okay, 11% of all non-grocery stores were online. This percentage is growing. I mean, you can see the numbers here. I mean, every year, the percentage, which is the bottom line, used to be 11, then 12, then 13, then 14, then 15, and then it goes 16, and so forth, non-grocery sales. Because some people quote numbers like 5–6%, but they put in all the grocery sales, so it dilutes the internet. We have to focus on grocery. And you see the reasons why people do that. I can find products I cannot find anywhere else, I save time, I get better deals. So these are the reasons why people do this. But a couple of observations. Number one is there's not generational time bomb. Lots of people think that as younger people get older, and so older people die, more and more people buy on the internet. It's not totally true. Look at the age groups and look at their percentage of purchase. Today, every age group purchases online. I mean, if I make always the test, but I'm not going to do it here, say, what percentage of your gifts for Christmas do you buy online? And I mean, it's amazing. You realize that, everybody, basically, every age group goes there. So there is no time bomb. Everybody does it. And the sales growth is total sales growth. I mean, if you look at this projection, this takes from 10 to 24, the next 14 years or 10 years now. There's going to be 51% growth in retail sales in general, based on statistics. The sources are Forrester research. Online sales growth is 243% versus 51%. And inline and store sales growth is only 40%. So the growth on online is incredible. But what's going to happen is this. What's happening is, although that's growing, that growth is a curve, asymptotic curve, which slowly basically is going to stabilize. And Forrester research, and these are the people who are in the online business, believe that there's going to be a stabilization around 20%. At 20% of total non-grocery sales, there's going to be a balance, and that's going to be the new format of the future business. The online retailers are going to adapt. They're going to totally integrate the brick and mortar, and the brick and mortar function. I mean, it's like going to be like, you can order a book on Barnes & Noble online, you can return it to the store, you can buy something at Nordstrom online, return it in the store, you can go in a store, they can ship it to you from another store, from a warehouse. I mean, everything will become very integrated, fungible in one place. So what's the conclusion? E-commerce will permanently transform, no doubt. I mean, 20% is an earthquake. But brick and mortar retail represents still a significant portion. But e-commerce cannot satisfy the experiential aspiration entirely. Look, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, you just use Apple for an example. I mean, this is that technology. I mean, you would think that that should be only be purchased online. I mean, why do you need even a store, right? I mean, these are tech savvy, they know internet, they use it every time. And look at the number their stores do. I mean, an Apple store does $60 million average. I mean, you understand, an Apple store, 6,000 square feet, does the volume of a Macy's in my project. 200,000 square feet, 6,000 square feet. You know, so the mixed-use town centers are the aspirational retail environment least impacted by e-commerce platforms. I mean, you understand that, right? I mean, if you're in a pure good distribution business, it's much difficult to resist that if you offer cinemas and restaurants and bars and comedy clubs, a place for people to meet and to get together. So, in summary, basically, we are saying that mixed-use town centers are a more sustainable development model. They help to return to an enhanced urban model of retailing in a mixed-use setting. They provide a successful cross-shopping environment for leisure time use and other retailers. And also it's uniquely responsive to the aspirational expectations because people want to be there, and because aspirational means people have to come. They are discretionary dollars. They don't have to spend that money. They want to spend it. And then they are less affected by the growth of e-commerce. So our final conclusion is that the mixed-use town centers will be the format for all future regional retail projects.